another draftphysics.com video presentation. Yeah, and such. So, back to the Professor Lewin demonstration video, to prove the point, to demonstrate the point, that this religion, that's physics, they're just ludicrous. So they'll parade their miracles in front of somebody. Somebody was cured of cancer, it's a miracle, blah, blah, blah. But no miracle will ever include images of somebody growing a new arm. We'll never have that as the miracle. And it just shows that, oh yeah, it's all suspect. And the same is true, in how they show examples of things. So they always build up into a context, keep it narrow, the focus, so you don't see the obvious. And there's obvious stuff in here in the sense that it's a clear violation of Newton's third law. So he'll talk about how the law is, we believe it because the evidence is overwhelming and it's never violated and there's no experiment showing that it violates. So therefore we believe it. We can't prove it, but we believe it. This kind of rhetoric. And then he'll do a demonstration where he's clearly violating it and it's no big deal. It's just so bad. The physics is so bad. It's so irrational. It's got so many continuity flaws in it. The stuff they've made up, their wave theory and their bent space stuff, none of it even fits together. This starts with a whole new premises, whole new multiverses created with different rules in them, depending on what subject they're talking about. It's just so bad. So anyway, I've been having this extended conversation with the trolls mostly on the AB Science video on Ken Wheeler's Ferrocell. And it seems like it's gone on a week. I guess it's only been 2 days. But, I'll post it. This one guy deleted some of his comments, so I did save a copy before that happened. So I'll post it on the website eventually, when we get to the conclusion of it. But it's just this constant badgering that I don't understand Jesus because I haven't given my heart to him. Some kind of bullshit, where somehow I'm just not doing it right. And that's why I don't understand this nonsense physics, this silly story they tell. And the physicists are telling the same kind of silly story. They don't even know the history of their own Bible, just like the religious people have no clue who wrote it, the politics that went on to decide what was in, what was out. They don't care about any of those facts. And the physicists are the same way. They don't care about the historical reasons why something exists in their physics. They just care that they have circular logic to defend it. They can point to some other broken thing and say, well, it fits that other broken piece, so it must work because, why would it fit if it wasn't a good part? Well, it only fits because you contrived a place for it to stick. You put duct tape on it, clearly. And their whole physics is duct taped together. So anyway, I'll play this again, and then I'll read the last couple of evasions by AB Science, who just evades, right? I mean, I've gone to the trouble, sort of, to try to condense the argument to these simple little thought experiments, these simple little tests that demonstrate the failure of their physics. And they won't answer the questions because they know they can't answer the question without breaking one of these fundamental elemental rules. And so they just keep evading it and pretending, well, as long as you just do the math and you don't pay attention to physical reality, it works. Yeah, well, that's not the standards for physics. Physics is supposed to be consistent with physical reality. It's supposed to make sense of these physical events. And this physical event, their physics, doesn't make any sense. And so just like the double slit experiment, he'll give you some explanation that sort of makes sense because the photon breaks in two and all that crap, completely doesn't work when you're trying to explain the single slit or the multiple slits, as the theory gets really loopy. But as long as they keep it isolated and control how they present the evidence, they can make the argument, make it, and fool people. But they're just fooling you. And it's not even a good job of fooling. I mean, that's why I saw it. It's because it's not that good. I'm not a very sophisticated tester, and I could see it. So anyway,
Now we're going to do an experiment whereby I'm going to make M2 twice the mass. M2 is 488 plus or minus 1 gram. Now that's going to be interesting, because now you really begin to test the conservation of momentum.
So you're not testing conservation of momentum, you're testing the conservation of energy, period. Who cares what you call it, right? I mean, the whole controversy is, what momentum, is it energy? I mean, this is just nonsense rhetoric. So the fact is there's a thing called energy, there's a capacity to move, whatever you want to call it. It's energy. And the fact is you're testing it, and it's gonna fail the test. The logic they have for their kinetic energy formula overtly fails the test because it violates one of these other rules that they say is a solid rule, and that's the paradox. That's the contradiction. You can't have these contradictions in your physics and call it reasonable. The contradictions means it's unreasonable. It's a violation of the fundamental rule of logic. Don't need to say more. So this is just AB Science didn't understand when I said opposite mass to velocity ratios. Obviously, it's inverse, mass to velocity ratios. And so this is the classical demonstration of where the kinetic energy formula completely fails.
The momentum before is 0. I burn the wire, momentum afterwards is also 0.
So again, this is the silly talk. I've said this before, but I mean, isn't that just a silly thing to say? I mean, after you burn the wire, the two cars are going to fly off, in opposite directions. There's zero momentum. What does that even mean? There's no point in saying that. Zero energy. There's not zero energy. Yes, there's two things moving in opposite ones, and those, add up to nothing, but there's still something happening in the universe, for fuck's sake. I mean, when the sun's supernovas, okay, there's zero momentum, right? Because there's, half the momentum's going this way, and half that way, and half this way, and half that way. So do we say it was a non-event? Oh, there was zero energy involved. No, it would be ridiculous to say that.
But the velocities, I erased this, v2 prime divided by v1 prime equals m1 divided by m2.
Right, so that's their formula. He's writing it in a box. It's a rule. It's kind of the stuff they put in boxes isn't the unimportant stuff. That's supposed to be the important stuff. So you're stuck. Inverse velocity to momentum, to mass ratios mean you're stuck with the thing having the same impact in the universe. It's just a fact.
And so twice the mass will get half the speed. And so now you're going to...
Yeah, not 1.4, as Piro says, and apparently some other people will contrive as an explanation. It's not 1.4. It's half the speed. Twice the half the mass, twice the speed. I mean, it's not 1.4 the speed.
You see that one car will go twice as slow as the other. That's the only way that nature can conserve momentum.
Right. So again, he says conserve momentum as if it's a real thing, but they have to argue that one of them has to be sacrificed for the other one to survive. So in this example, you'll see kinetic energy sacrificed. It'll be overtly dead. Okay, in the sense it won't be conserved. And there really won't be any rational explanation, as I'll point out. There won't be any way of explaining where it went, why it's not equal anymore.
There's no choice. Nature can deal with kinetic energy one way or another, but it cannot finagle momentum.
So I don't even know, he says these words and he should be saying, why am I saying that? Why should I say nature finagles something? What do you mean? How does it finagle it? It makes energy disappear, or it makes energy just arise out of nothing. I can make extra energy. I throw something up into the gravity and it goes 4 times higher because it's half as massive or something, and somehow it lands with 4 times the energy because it went 4 times as high in gravity. I don't think so.
It must give the more massive car half the speed than it gives the other car.
So he says it must, but nobody takes that too seriously who's opposing this argument, because apparently it doesn't must.
And so we're going to redo this experiment now with a car here which is twice the mass, and this one equals Where's my other card? Oh, my card is here.
All right, so all of this is kind of almost, you're saying these are college students. They really should be able to follow along. But anyway, so he did two of the same mass cars. They leave with the same velocity. They leave with the same momentum. The smaller car is going to do exactly what it did the first time. It's going to do exactly the same thing, go with exactly the same speed, the same momentum. And, the argument is, and the heavier car is going to go 1/2 the speed, not 1.4, not some other silly number. And the clear illustration, let's get to it.
And this one is 1's mass. So this is the 244, and the one on your right is the 488. So I have to bring them together again with a string. So I do the work now. I always do the work here in 26100.
So they have a silly definition of work. Like I say, when a sun supernovas, there's no work because the momentums are in the opposite direction. So I'm just saying work by their standard is not accurate. They'll say when I'm holding something in gravity in my hand, I'm not doing any work because I'm not moving against a force. Which is obviously I am doing work.
Work. I squeeze these springs. I get paid for that, by the way. And that's potential energy that goes into the spring. Right?
Okay, and potential doesn't mean anything because it's momentum that goes into the spring. It's obviously the capacity for elements to move. So they've been pushed into more pressure. The little atoms are in conditions where they're magnetically not lined up anymore, and they have a real pressure to relax, go to their uncompressed circumstance as atoms. They're too close to each other. The electrons have been smashed next to each other, that kind of thing. And that's what's in there. It's real momentum.
It is. Momentum is zero.
So momentum is obviously not zero for the spring. The spring contains the capacity to produce movement because it has in it stored pressure.
Energy is zero. I have to zero the timers. Oh, and I would like to make a prediction. I would like to see, we'll measure T1, and then we'll measure T2, and then we get a number, and we get a number, and if we multiply this number by 2.00...
No, it doesn't say 1.4, okay? So clearly, he's not getting your argument that somehow the universe is disabled somehow and it can't produce these proportional outcomes.
Then I would like to get this number within the uncertainties of the measurements. There is always an uncertainty in any measurement that you do. All right? Make sure that are the timer zero? Okay, there we go.
All right, so the heavy one takes twice as long to get away, so therefore it's going half as fast. Simple, obvious, all of that stuff. Now the question is to say, okay, so the momentums are equal. If I do the addition for momentum, the same momentum went this way, the same momentum went that way. But if I do the kinetic energy thing, the little one is supposed to have twice as much kinetic energy. So somehow by Newton's third law, right, I sent twice as much kinetic energy that way, okay, that went this way. So the only way you can make an argument, you got to say, well, it's not in the cart. The cart doesn't have the kinetic energy. The heavier cart has 1/2 the kinetic energy. So how do you resolve Newton's third law with that circumstance? You have to make up some insane fallacy that somehow the spring didn't put all the kinetic energy into the other cart somehow. Somehow it got really hot, it split in two. It did. Where did they have the theory that it just got lost to the environment somewhere? Somehow there was magic friction, or the wind blew something. What? There's absolutely zero rational explanation for how you can have the same momentum and different kinetic energies. It never makes any sense. It's stupid. It's silly. It's so nonsensical. The spring didn't not be able to give the heavier cart the energy. And it can't give the other cart more energy because it left at the same speed it did when there was the same mass on the other side of the spring. So nothing happened on the high kinetic energy cart. That one didn't do anything different. So something had to happen differently for the heavier cart. Somehow the spring just didn't work. didn't function properly. And it didn't do the equal and opposite reaction thing. So I'm just saying either they admit Newton's third law is rubbish, okay, or they have to admit that there's something wrong with the kinetic energy formula. They can't have it both ways. And yet they want to insist they can have it both ways. And it's never rational. It doesn't make any sense. I could play this video, or I could play Physics Girl's video, where she says, we transferred 100% of the momentum, and yet we made things hot, and we deformed things, and we made sounds, and we made all kinds of stuff out of no momentum. With using no momentum, we made lots of stuff happen. You can't do that. If your momentum is in something, if you transfer it to something else to create heat or to create sound or to create deformation, you can't keep it and cause those things. I can't deform the environment with my fist without my fist and my energy having to be used up. I can't do that and also wash the dishes with the same energy. If I'm deforming something, I'm used my energy to deform it. I can't recover my energy. I mean, in the case of a spring, springs really are quite, the idea of something pushing back is kind of neat, just because it overtly does something that you would think would be impossible, which is it almost for free changes this direction into that direction. So that's, on its face, pretty good trick, okay? Without losing any energy, you turned, you changed the energy completely in the opposite direction, which is pretty cool. Then it stores energy really well, okay, and you can measure energy very well. So, very good experimental device, completely misunderstood by the physics.
What do you see? 406, 193. Whew! On the button!
Not exactly
406 and 193. 0.406, is that what you see? Yeah? And 0.193.
Alright, well, he does his little math there. Well, we'll just play it.
I don't even need my calculator to multiply this by 2. I can even do that by heart. 9, 3. 0.396, 0.406.
Yes, so he got it wrong. Whatever. Okay.
Close enough. The two are in excellent agreement within the 2.5% uncertainty in each measurement. So, you see, that's exactly how you can demonstrate the conservation of momentum.
Right, and the complete ignoring of kinetic energy. We have to ignore kinetic energy in this example. That's what he should say. In this example, we're going to ignore kinetic energy because if we pay any attention to it, we've just violated Newton's third law. And, we have absolutely no way of explaining how it's possible that, a big chunk of the energy, half the energy, somehow didn't go where it was supposed to go. All right, so that in the context of, I might as well play the last second just in case.
Picked up kinetic energy, but after the wire was burned, the momentum remained 0.
Okay, so he said they picked up, so let's play that again, actually. They picked up kinetic energy. So he's talking while he's doing things, so he doesn't realize what he's saying, but it's just so silly.
The conservation of momentum. They picked up kinetic energy.
They picked up kinetic energy, so somehow there is kinetic energy somewhere, but it's not realized in your outcome anywhere. There's no, there's completely uneven kinetic energy. More kinetic energy went this way than went that way. So where's the equal and opposite reaction? Oh, there isn't one.
But after the wire was burned, the momentum remained 0.
Well, again, it obviously didn't remain 0. It means equal momentums went both ways. And completely consistent with rational physics. And the irrational physics is this kinetic energy pile of crap that never had a good day in its life. The kinetic energy theory never had a good scientific day. Okay, like in 350 years, it was never good science. It was always just a sideshow. It was sideshow experiments. It was always Ken Wheeler physics. And here it is, shoved right in the middle of their physics, right in its core. They have this silly totem pole. All right. Well, I'll take a little break and switch to the dialogue. All right, just a little bit of complaining, about YouTube's function. It's really annoying that, yeah, I can't keep his video from playing every time I reload the page. It autoplays, even though I have the little autoplay off. It plays. Can't stop it. So if I scroll down to read the ads, to read the comments, the ads start playing. And you have to go back and turn it off. It's, these cruddy, slimy YouTube features. Even the fact that, it used to be on YouTube that you could just link to the comments. You didn't have to link to the whole video. So you could just link to the a web page that just had comments on it. No video would play. No video was accessible. Why would they destroy that feature? Why would they force people to load the video except for the purpose of just pretending to the ad people, the people who paid for ads, that they got more visibility than they really did? That's clearly, it seems like the only reason they would force the video to play, because it's just more expensive for YouTube to serve it. But they know that that's what's going to happen. The ad will play, they have to switch off the ad, blah, 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 so you're seeing the ad again, It's just such... You would think that there would be some people who, as a collective of people who use YouTube, that we could all do a little complaining and fix this kind of crap. But that doesn't happen. All right, so we have 26 replies here. That's what it says. Some of them seem to be missing, frankly. So, blah, 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 blah. But lots of back and forth. I read some of it in the previous video, so I'll just get to the most recent. The evasion just keeps continuing. Don't answer my questions. Don't answer my questions. They just keep not answering my questions. They're just saying, you're too stupid to understand. And it's like, what the fuck? It's just endless. So, all right, we'll start with the AB Science here. And then we'll read my last two replies. But it's just so bad. Ask a simple question, get crap. Crappy evasion. So you ask a religious person, well, why doesn't God grow arms on people? And then they'll just make, well, you don't understand how religion works. It's all based on faith. And if God made his miracles visible, well, then you would have good reason to believe in God. And it's not about having a good reason to believe in God. It's about believing without a good reason. Because that's what makes religion so powerful and strong and great, is believing when it's not reasonable to believe. That's what God wants you to do. God wants you to believe in him, even though it's a preposterously silly and stupid theory. Because that is the glory of God, is you doing something irrational and moronic. God loves that. That's what they're doing here. They're just making up, contriving silly frickin' stories to rationalize nonsense. There was nothing wrong with Newton's physics. It was a perfect working model of the universe, of, the solar system anyway. But it could be applied to the universe. It worked. It was really good physics. All right? And Leibniz just pooped his little crap. Okay, I want physics that has magic in it because I'm religious. And I want godly physics. I want something God has to keep putting free energy into. And somehow that crap physics won. Somehow the silly, stupid, not working theory won the argument. Because the right people said it. The right people, dressed nice and fancy, propagandized for it. And somehow they just all got sucked in, to chicanery. They all, oh, Ken is such a special guy. Look, he's fat and ugly and bald and creepy. And, I wouldn't let him babysit my goldfish. Isn't that a miracle? He's just so magical. He's so interestingly magical. I can't, I just stare at those holes in his ears. It's so cool. Fuck. Anyway. If you watch Walter Lewin's lectures and actually understood them, so he just has to keep throwing in these stupid fucking insults that just don't. I mean, yeah, I just watched him do an experiment. I understood the experiment. You really don't have evidence that I'm not getting it. Okay, so just making this gratuitous over and over again, like somehow I didn't see the magical details. The magical details, I missed all of them. Then you would realize that your questions don't actually make sense. So yeah, so you ask, how does the cart on one side have twice as much energy as the cart on the other side? Isn't that a violation of Newton's third law? And what's your explanation again? Oh, the spring didn't work. Somehow it failed to do what it was supposed to do on one side. I mean, come on. This isn't that tough. But they just can't stop with the incessant, unnecessary, gratuitous, ad hominem insults to my intelligence. All right. I'm sure they do in your mind, I'm sure you think you have integrity in your mind, but you clearly have zero. Okay? I mean, yes, I understand you have profiled the world. Okay, because you went to college and you did your little physics thing. Now you've profiled the world based on the fact that there are flat earthers out there and there are conspiracy theory people, and so a giant percentage of the critics are wrong. It's true, I'll grant you. Okay, but you're just profiling, and it's not true that every single one is talking shit, and you really don't have an ethical right to assume everybody's an idiot. But the problem is simply that you do not understand the language well enough. I mean, I understand the word energy and I understand conservation. Anyway, to communicate the question in a sensible manner, so just more crap. I mean, just over and over again. I mean, maybe Lewin actually said it in that little clip, right? Inverse to mass ratio. Maybe even said that. I think I know what you're trying to ask. Yeah, well, the obvious thing is to say, well, then just answer it. Okay, I would recommend that you go through Walter Lewin's lectures again. So, I've played the clips over and over again. No one has provided anything called a rational explanation for the obvious paradox. And then go through the accompanying exercises. So yes, go do some more comparisons with the fake formula and then the faker formulas that we wrote to circularly justify the fake formula. Like the work energy theorem, Force times distance. Whatever distance means. Yeah. Okay. If your question is what I think it is, so here he's implying again that he knows what the question is, but he won't answer it. It would be a trivial exercise to find the answer after you have set the basic mechanics course. After you have sat this basics mechanics course, I don't know what that means, and done the practice problem. So again, it's all about convoluted, self-justifying mathematics, and has nothing to do with actually you seeing it. It has nothing to do with physical experiments demonstrating. It just has to do with, again, if he's doing a two-slit experiment, he makes one kind of argument. Light plus light makes dark, blah, blah, blah. And then he does the other ones, it's a different kind of argument. It's just circular. If you still have these questions after giving it a good try, what mush, at least you will be able to communicate them effectively. So just insult after insult after bullshit insult about how he can't understand a paradox. He won't accept that it's been clearly enough illustrated. Okay, that if you use the kinetic energy theorem to navigate in space, you're going to crash because you think it takes 2,000 joules to shoot a dime 1,000 miles an hour, and it doesn't. All right. If you watched Walter Lewin's lectures, so I said I've played 40 of the lectures in my videos and watched them all more than once. I've played them more than once in my videos. and actually understood them. He doesn't say anything regarding the history of Leibniz's living force. So this is something missing from the lecture, is any history at all. So nobody, I haven't seen a single professor talk about the history of the kinetic energy formula. None of them mention the controversy. Madame Chartelet never comes up. I haven't seen a single professor discuss the bullshit clay experiments. That's only been in, other documentary type TV shows. Okay, in one lecture he argues there are two different voltages in the same location. I outed the probing error before Electric Boom did his video. So when I was playing Lewin's videos, I actually pointed out how that sounds pretty ludicrous. You can't have two voltages in the same location. Anyway, then you would realize that your questions don't actually make sense. No, saying there's two voltages in the same location doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make any sense at all, okay, to argue that I completely transferred the momentum, and yet I lost half the energy. So when Physics Girl said that, it was ludicrous, it was stupid, it was insensible science, it's nonsensical garbage. Anyway, then you would realize that your questions don't actually make sense. And so I said, maybe the fault lies in yourself, Horatio, as a joke. I'm sure that they do in your mind. Oh, yeah. They are really simple thought experiments. Same force produces different kinetic energies, ... paradox. So it just leads to a paradox. It's obvious there's a paradox. There's obvious a violation of fundamental laws. You can't have your theory and then you have to explain again, where did the energy go? Newton's law says the same that goes this way has to go that way. Well, where's the example? Why didn't it happen in Professor Lewin's demonstration? But the problem is simply that you do not understand the language well enough to communicate the question in a sensible manner. The morons at Quora evaded the answering the question. So again, we haven't gotten any good answers from anybody, okay? No one has provided anything called a rational answer. Piro vaguely references some notion of things only go 1.4 times as fast. Momentum is destroyed. That's Piro's counter theory. Is kinetic energy is conserved and is rational because momentum is destroyed. Okay. But they don't use this excuse. So this excuse that you can't understand the question is just so bullshit. The 4 different questions I asked, you can't touch any of them. You can't understand any of them. I think I know what you're trying to ask. So I say, what is this, a knock-knock joke? So I'm supposed to say what besides, then why don't you answer the questions? If you think you can understand the question, then just answer the fucking question. Oh, damn. I would recommend that you go through Walter Lewin's lectures again. And then I state, I bet I know more about the history of the kinetic energy formula than Walter Lewin. The fact is, I don't think any of these physicists were ever taught any of it. They might have some vague allusion to what it is. I mean, I don't even think most of them realize that Leibniz was overtly undoing Newton's mechanics. He was overtly challenging it. This is not some branch of Newton. This is by Newton's worst enemy in life, the guy who stole his calculus. This is a guy who loved trying to take Newton down. And let's understand that Leibniz died a nobody. Okay. So he didn't win the argument. He didn't persuade anybody that this mv squared thing was a superior formula. Okay, it was only decades later when it was dug up by the French aristocrats that this happened. German French. All right. And then go through the accompanying exercises. I mean, just more insinuation that the math is so much more important than physical reality. The accusation is you are using circular reasoning to justify mv squared. The exercises don't unravel the free energy paradoxes. You can't fix it with math. Math isn't going to explain where the energy went. why there's more energy going one way than the other way. If your question is what I think it is, questions are to be answered, not endlessly gossiped about. So I thought that was a pretty funny joke. He just keeps talking about, how baggy the question's pants are. Oh, the question is such a four-eyed nerdy dupe. Oh, I can't deal with that. you know, the question is left-handed. It's not allowed to be left-handed question. Oh, it's such a slut. The question is such a slut. Oh, I can't deal with that question. It's such a slut. I mean, what the fuck? It would be okay, so I said it would be. He says it would be a trivial exercise to find the answer. So more allusions to, well, if I was to answer your questions, it would be a trivial answer because yes, you're completely wrong and I'm completely right. And I can't possibly be challenged. Oh, it's just so fucking arrogant. All right, and I say what's trivial is the supporting clay experiments. And another joke, he used the word straw man, and I said you should use the word clay man because it would be a great joke. Anyway, obviously the clay experiments are really, really bad science. To think that clay is a really good way of measuring, how far something penetrates in clay. As I pointed out, if I just did the experiment instead of clay, I used cornstarch, then I would prove VM squared. Okay? I would prove a completely different kinetic energy formula. So obviously the trivial mistake of thinking clay has been proven to be the greatest way to measure energy, penetration in clay, is just so fallacious. Okay. After you have sat this basic mechanics, SAT, I don't know what that means, course, and done the practice problem. So again, just more evasions. So if Professor Lewin says there's 2 voltages in one place, there's got to be 2 voltages in one place, and he has the practice problems, he has all that crap, it's still, he's still denying an obvious truth, which is the voltages isn't in the location, it's in your probe wire. But anyway, the problem is you have no physical evidence defending this voodoo formula. And that's the physical fact. There's no physical evidence. They'd show it, and the conversation be over. So the fact is they can't show a good example of kinetic energy in action because it's not a good theory. That's why there's no evidence. If you still have these questions after giving it a good try, I don't even know what that means. Then what? You'll stand on your head and sing a spoonful of sugar? Okay, eventually you won't answer the questions, right? So it won't matter. Okay, eventually a credentialed physicist is going to actually research the subject and realize the obvious truth that Newton's momentum mechanics was not in any way substantially broken. And it didn't need to be fixed by Leibniz. It worked, it's solid, and there was no reason to change any of it. Okay, and that the kinetic energy formula was an embarrassing scientific misstep. I mean, it's worse than that. I mean, it's, this isn't a scientific misstep. This is a religious misstep. It was a misstep to allow somebody who overtly was telling you Newton's physics doesn't have enough God energy in it. That's his exact, it's an exact paraphrase, okay, of his opinion. Newton's mechanics was too austere. There wasn't any role for God to play. So he had to invent a reason that we needed a God. And so he created this silly living force. And the French aristocrats were all obsessed with things like free will and happy lives. And so that's why they find it appealing to have this extra energy thing, because then they could talk about this magical living force energy. It was life affirming. That's in the core of their physics, their science. Anyway, it's not even religion, it's pseudo-religion. It's not even good religion. It's not even solid religion. Okay, you're going to be on the wrong side of that destiny and look pretty foolish. So, pretty good statement on my part, I think. At least you will be able to communicate them effectively. Here he goes again. Your evasion was effective, but also quite obvious. So again, he admits he gets the idea of the question. He still won't answer any of them. None of the four, I could have included more, but none of the four I've offered him will he touch. Okay, so AB Science says, so he quotes me, same forces, different energies, paradox. And he says, again, it is very clear that you haven't understood the lectures. I'm understanding the experiment. Okay, I'm saying overtly when Physics Girl says, we 100% transferred the momentum, but we created a lot of deformation and heat. You can't pour all the paint in the bucket and then claim, but we spilled half of it. It's nonsense. That's overtly your physics is saying, and it's nonsense, and you're taking no responsibility. You're sitting there covering it up, you're part of what is it? What is it? What can I say? I mean, you're just such doopy propagandists that you won't even acknowledge that that's a question that should be answered. I should point out how it's not spilling the paint and pouring it in the bucket. Yes, if that's the impression she said, if that's what she said, and that's a good interpretation of what she said, she shouldn't have said that, and I should explain why that's wrong. But you won't do any of this. Oh, anyway, it's just so bad. You may think you do, but you don't. You should look into how energy is defined. Some more recommendations. Start with a definition of potential energy. So, not even close to the subject. And use the simple case of an object falling down a constant potential gradient. So again, this more argument about the train hitting each other or dropping a weight on a train is somehow has something to do with a constant potential gradient. No, it doesn't. To derive the formula for kinetic energy, once you have grasped these concepts, you can take the example problems and you give and find out what the difference is between the situation. So I get this is just such a cover-up. Once you look at it our way, you'll realize there's no controversy. That yes, of course you can spill half the paint and pour it all into the bucket. Of course you can, because God said so. God says you can spill half of it and still pour it all into the bucket. It's just one of God's things. He allows that to happen. It's fun. It's what makes the universe fun. Hint, the higher energy object results in greater compression of the spring. Duh. Let's see. Duh. That's what I'm arguing, actually. Yeah, that's what I'm arguing. And that the two carts, the cart going fast, the lighter cart going fast, and the heavy cart going slow, what I'm arguing is if you put a spring to collect the energy, they'll compress the spring the same amount. There'll be no evidence of this kinetic energy. Okay, so once you grasp, a higher energy up to greater compression of the spring. Okay, just take a moment and think about what you're saying. I have taken actually long 10 years of moments, and yeah, I understand. These are, I obviously it's me against a big giant pile of people who believe, but that's still the same odds when I'm arguing religion. So. Is that what I'm supposed to do? Is if I take this advice? So let's say I made an atheist statement, and so you would give an atheist the same advice. Take a moment and think about what you're saying. You're contradicting the vast majority of the human race. I mean, don't you understand how that's irrational for you to sit there and think you're right and all of them are wrong? That's crazy talk. How dare you think you're right and they're wrong? 90% of people are wrong? It might be 99, right? I mean, the world is getting dumber and dumber. Idiocracy is on the move. And it's because the intellectuals have their head up their asses. Anyway, there are two possible consequences. Either all physics is wrong. So no one's saying all physics is wrong. So again, just more horseshit. Okay, if we find one brontosaurus with the wrong head on it, or we find out that somebody faked a fossil, you don't say all the theory about the evolution of mankind and animals is incorrect. No, you just acknowledge the mistakes made. All right, either all physics is wrong and you're the only person smart enough to realize it. Well, yes, I apparently, but obviously I'm not the only one. So there have been people who've previously commented on the fact that it doesn't make any sense. So I'm not the only one to bring this point up. And clearly, if we go back a few hundred years, there's lots of people who would make arguments. Now, they didn't have frankly, they weren't very skilled at making the argument, okay, because they couldn't show or isolate the paradox as well as I can, just because of the fact that we do have all these experiments that have been done, and we do have air tracks, and we do have lots of advantages now, so we can make it more obvious that it's silly. I can show the cornstarch, and I can show the guy punching the cornstarch and getting nowhere, gaining no penetration. And and just showing that, I can show how, we got to be careful about what we use to test energy, because some of the things we test it with are going to give us the impression that's not correct. And I used the ferrocell. In the last month, I've said the word, at least a dozen times, maybe more, as an illustration of exactly what you have to look out for is the optical illusions. And clearly that's what it was. It was smoke and mirrors in its inception. It was smoke and mirrors through its whole migration into science. It bored its way into science with smoke and mirror gimmicks, silly clay experiments. Or you have misunderstood something. So anyway, are you really arrogant enough to concede the former? Either all of physics is wrong. I'm not conceding anything. I'm overtly asserting, yes, physics has made a mistake. Anyway, even when we consider the fact that the definition of kinetic energy is used in every branch of physics, so what? It's not used when it matters. So I would argue when men are landing on the moon, they're not using it. But anyway, this was my formal response. So it says same forces, different energy, paradox again. Okay, then he says, it is very clear that you haven't understood the lectures. You may think you do, but you don't. And I say, this argument's over as soon as you produce evidence. So all you have to do is show me, and there's no paradox, and we're done. But you can't. Okay, show me things with inverse mass to velocity ratios producing different amounts of work, energy, pressure. Show the experiment where you collect this extra energy, where the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour produces twice as many watts of electricity as the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. I say it right here in the comment. Show me a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour lighting more lights than a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. You can't show any examples of it because it doesn't happen. Okay, as Newton knew, there is only momentum. So, I mean, the argument is clear, and I can't imagine, besides deleting this comment thread or just ignoring it entirely, what's his response to that? He's got to concede, yes, well, this is a paradox and I should be able to explain it. You should look into how energy is defined. And so I say quite sensibly, it is defined in units, okay, whether you call it joules or watts or pounds, it doesn't matter. And your theory says a dime going 1,000 miles an hour has 1,000 more units than 2 kilograms going 1 mile an hour. That's plainly physically ridiculous, I say. So that's the point. The dime isn't going to make 1,000 times more tears and rips, and it's not going to make 1,000 times more heat. It's not going to do it. It can't do it. It's silly. If it were true, then the recoil of a gun would shoot you through, a few brick walls. If this energy theory were true, Okay, the consequences of the opposite reactions would be, destroying all kinds of things. Start with a definition of potential energy. So I say, thinking potential energy has anything to do with this demonstrates you don't know the 350-year-old subject controversy at all. So it's just a clear denial of what the issue is. The issue was never about the fact that you can store energy as potential or you can derive energy from potential circumstances like in gravity. But that has nothing to do with mv squared. All right, and use the simple case of an object falling down a constant potential gradient to derive the formula for kinetic energy. So I point out collisions aren't falling down constant potential gradients. Not all energy exchanges are gravitational, and this is the big joke that somehow physics wants to make every interaction that takes place in the universe, they want to create the silly notion, the silly fact that it's not silly. That if I want to get twice the velocity, I have to go 4 times higher in gravity, just because of how gravity works. Okay, gravity is just a poking force. It just does this. So if you want to double your velocity, you have to go, you have to go to the extra pokes to do it, because it's only giving you a tiny portion of your velocity at a time. But your accumulated velocity is much bigger than the portion it's pushing in. It's an accumulation of velocity. Anyway, let's see, and use a simple case of an object falling. Okay, we already did that. Once you have grasped these concepts, you can take the example problem that you give and find out what the differences is between the situations. Hint, the higher energy object results in greater compression of the spring. Okay, hint, as I just showed in the Professor Lewin video, that isn't what's going to happen. When that lighter, faster cart hits the spring, and when the heavier cart hits the spring on the other end, they're going to compress it exactly the same amount, because springs measure your momentum. They don't measure your kinetic energy. They're going to be equally compressed. Hint, 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 hint. You're a stupid idiot, so I'm giving you a hint because you're a stupid idiot. I mean, this is so obnoxious, that you haven't done the experiment, you have no knowledge of the experiment, you're just making crap up and then using the word hint in front of it. And you don't think that somebody should be profoundly insulted by your bullshit here? I mean, can you grow up just a little tiny bit? God damn. Yet you have no physical example you can link to, and that's the fact. There's no link to that hint happening. Okay, and I can link to lots of examples of conservation of momentum always working. I can link you, just as I just showed you, Professor Lewin overtly saying, you can't fuck with momentum. Kinetic energy, yeah, it's well, whatever, you could lose it here and there. It falls out of your pockets, blah, 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 blah. But momentum, no, sorry. You can't screw with it. It has to be conserved. Okay. Ugh, just so obnoxious. Ew. 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 Anyway, where was I? Okay, you have no physical example. Okay, just take a moment and think about what you're saying. There are 2 possible consequences. So they just keep doing this pigeonhole bullshit stuff. There's only 2 choices. You have a brain tumor or there's a bunny in your ear. No, I think there's a lot of other choices. Anyway, the question I asked illustrates the paradoxes. Clearly, you refuse to answer them. Okay. So that's the simple. I don't need to take a moment. I've spent plenty of moments, and clearly every single one of you physicist type people are evasive, rude, okay, and belligerently ignorant in your argumentation. I mean, it doesn't even come close to addressing the question. All right. Either all physics is wrong and you are the only person smart enough to realize it. All physics is shockingly under evidence. Now, that's been the theme of this channel from the very start, is that they don't give you good reason to believe they've done a good trial, they finished the story here, that you have the complete answer. These are horribly incomplete theories, horribly under evidence theories. Even the Einstein thing, right? First it starts with the Eddington experiment that's such a pile of crap. And then they move on to, well, you wouldn't have any GPS if it wasn't for Einstein. Well, that only proves that velocity breaks clocks. It doesn't prove that there's a time dimension. So I mean, it's understanding they don't have good evidence for any of this crap they have made up. The existence of the electric field and the existence of the magnetic field of whatever it's a field of. There's no evidence for it. Anyway, all physics is shockingly under evidenced. I mean, this is something they should be able to concede. Yes, we've made up our religion. They should just say it. We've made it up, not because it was overtly shown, not because I can hand you the evidence, no, but because we think it's really cool theory. And I will clue you in, there's no bent space, there's no elemental wave, and there's no kinetic energy separate from momentum. Okay. Or you have misunderstood something. I haven't misunderstood your evasion. So that was my response to that, right? It's just clearly he's evading the paradoxes. The paradoxes are right there in front of you. I'm saying to you overtly, right there in the Professor Lewin, you have a paradox. Okay, in the sense that he will tell you Newton's third law is unviolatable, and yet he just violated it because he sent more kinetic energy this way than he sent that way, and he's really not going to be able to explain why that happened. All right. Are you really arrogant enough to conclude the former? The physical evidence gives me no choice. So again, when you look at the physical evidence, they say something about the two-slit. They say something about this. They say something about that. You go look at the evidence, you see that the evidence sucks. So when they said, hey, light's bent twice as much by gravity, and you say, well, gee, this is really exceptional, right? Because no other force anywhere has ever been tested to be manipulated by another force. So the elemental forces can't interact with elemental forces. And yet you're saying, yes, they can. Gravity is a special case. And it bends photons twice as much as anything else in the universe. So it's not only a special case, it's twice as much as any other physical substance in the universe. It's affected twice as much for some reason. Those are reasons to look deeper. And so I look deeper, and what you find is the evidence sucks. It doesn't exist. You can't even repeat the stupid experiment, even with 400 times better resolution in space. Come on. That's plausibly credible? No, it's not plausibly credible. Anyway, I'm driven by evidence ultimately, and there isn't any for their theory, and my theory fits better. That's the real point. Even when we consider the fact that the definition for kinetic energy is used in every branch of physics, I say, how much you want to bet the formula wasn't in the computer that landed the lunar module on the moon? Just understand back in the 69, we're talking about back in the 60s, computers didn't, they barely had 5 bytes of memory. So you had to be very careful what you put into the computer because every bit of computer space was like $10,000. I mean, so you wouldn't put anything in the computer that was superfluous. There was just nothing in there superfluous. Every bit of it had to be really important. Because the storage was vitally important, and you didn't want to waste any of it. And there would be just no use for the kinetic energy formula, because everything the lunar module had to do was about transferring momentum to navigate, and that's it. And that's all it had as a formula, was understanding its obligation to recognize how much it has to shoot out of it to get the opposite reaction. and it couldn't play any silly kinetic energy game, where I can spill my thrust, and I can also go somewhere. I mean, no, it can't do it both ways. Anyway, the point is I really do bet that there was no kinetic energy formula in the computer hardware, because it just wouldn't be of any value. All right, anyway. So there's not much you can say. So we'll see what the next pile of crap will be, but I'm sure it'll be crap. We'll try a reload just for the fun of it. See if there's a new comment. But again, I'm predicting he's not going to just evade the question. He's going to evade the conversation and pretend it just didn't happen. 26. I think that's the same number it was, frankly. But I don't remember. Blah, 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 blah. So there was a bunch of other stuff with this troll guy, but it's just debating about debating, and, I mean, it was just such a waste of time. All right, so mine is the last one still. Okay, so, there's nothing, It's so, I mean, it should be obvious that, I just don't see how anybody with integrity doesn't recognize that. I mean, clearly I've made a conscientious effort to engage people in providing explanations. And they're saying I shouldn't need one. That I should just believe because they believe. And it's just, I mean, I'm offering them money. What else do I do? I mean, I should offer. Maybe I'll do it again. I'll just sit there and tell AB Science, how much do I have to pay you to do a video on kinetic energy, the kinetic energy history, and just explain to us how Madame Chardelet was doing great science, that it was really brilliant of her to just do clay experiments, just do experiments that tend to show what she wanted to prove, and that was what great scientists do. Is they quote mine the evidence. I mean, I'd love to hear his take on what great science is and what a great scientist is, because I think that sucks at science, frankly. And maybe he could tell us what Newton's opinion was. What did Newton think of mv squared? That, like I said, there are a few quotes out there. There's a few little bits where he says it's just nonsense. But, and they keep calling it Newtonian physics. It's just so ironic. I mean, maybe he should explain why Leibniz was, what gave Leibniz the insight? How did he see the holy kinetic energy grail? Did it come to him as from God? Yeah. So bad. So anyway, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Endeavor to persevere, Gary. So, this has been a DraftPhysics.com video presentation and such.